The Cardinals have a special edge over everybody else in Major League Baseball, plus a deep dive into the back end of the Cardinals rotation with spring right ahead, as well as did we just get an ultimatum on a Brendan Donovan trade? Folks, we have 22 days from pitchers and catchers reporting in Florida, so thank you for tuning in to the St. Louis Cardinals Daily Podcast. My name is Andrew Teuscher. We're looking to cover your Redbirds every day, get you prepared for the season starting. And first off, I want to start with a really interesting article put out there by Josh Jacobs of Redbird Rants. If you're like me and your New Year's resolution is to learn how to read and you like sports, it's a great place to start. They produce some great articles out there, and specifically Josh Jacobs. And the article is about a special edge that the Cardinals might have over the rest of Major League Baseball. At first, I thought this edge was kind of silly, didn't make a lot of sense. But, and the players wouldn't even think about it, but it turns out players are talking about this. This is a consideration some players have made when joining the team. And that special edge is health. Keeping starting pitchers healthy at the major league level was an edge that the Cardinals had last year that many other teams didn't. For instance, there were 4 pitchers on the Cardinals last year, 4 starters who threw 150 innings or more. And in today's game where teams are pitching guys really short innings and trying to save those arms and having them throw 100 plus and blowing out their arms, that's an edge. Only 2 other teams in all of Major League Baseball did what the Cardinals did last year, having 4 pitchers throw 150 plus innings. So it stunk that those innings were terrible last year. Don't get me wrong. Miles Mikolas, Andre Pallante going out there every 5th day wasn't quite a blessing. But if we can project that into guys as our team gets more talent, that could be something that the Cardinals could really use to their advantage going forward. And again, it's not just something that myself or Jacobs, as he wrote this article, or fans are just looking in and saying, oh, yeah, we noticed that happened last year. Apparently, it's a thing that's actually being considered by the players. Jacobs mentions in his article he got a chance to talk to Andre Grania, for instance, a minor league pitcher for the Cardinals, and asked him, do players actually talk about the Cardinals pitchers being able to stay healthy? And his response was, quote, yeah, absolutely. He went on to say that he's, in the minor league, so he's not seeing as much of the big league dugout. But as guys come over from the Rule 5 draft, is specifically what he mentions, and other means, they ask each other, what's life like in your organization? What do you guys do differently? And immediately he brings up that the thing they tell folks is that their starters get healthy. They stay healthy. Their training staff stays on top of them. And it's something that the Cardinals take great pride in. And it's something that the players themselves are noticing and selling to other players as they're joining the team. I thought that was super insightful. Even at the minor league level, this was being brought up. And the Cardinals signed this offseason a pitcher who's known for one thing, constantly being hurt. Again, even a freak salad accident for Dustin May. And of course, Dustin May, whenever he was talking to teams, asked around, hey, what's your plan for keeping me healthy? What's your support staff around? And that's a very valid question, and that's maybe why he picked the Cardinals, because he was quoted saying that was definitely something whenever I was going through the process and was talking with teams. He definitely brought that up as he was discussing with teams. How can he stay healthy? What do you have to offer? And the Cardinals said, hey, look, we can prove this is what we have to offer. And May and his agent and his family sat down and decided the Cardinals actually have an edge for this. And Dustin May was very excited about that, and that might be why he signed with the team, in part to obviously a nice salary we handed him for the next year. But it's something good to know going forward as the Cardinals truly aren't going to be that competitive this year and weren't really chasing free agents this year. If we can produce another year like this and we can turn to free agents in 2027 and 2028 and tell them, hey, this is an actual thing we're doing, that'd be huge for free agency, let alone the competitive edge it would give us by not having to dip into starting pitching depth like everybody else in the league is having to do. It's really cool on paper when you have the Dodgers rotation with stars everywhere. It's not so cool when those guys aren't able to pitch all the time, and that was a hole we ended up seeing for the Dodgers whenever they got to the World Series. They ended up winning it, but it was by no thanks to a team that was constantly hurt, battling injuries, and had a terrible bullpen because of it. So this is something that the Cardinals actually have, can wield going into future off seasons and future competitive seasons. Hopefully it's something that can keep up. I think we typically see this reflected in the fact that a lot of the Cardinals pitchers aren't necessarily flamethrowers, but Marmol and Bloom and others have attributed it to, in part one, our 6-man rotation that we deployed for a good bit of last year, and we've already talked about using this year, and additionally, all the training staff being glorified by guys like Granillo saying how great they are and how forthcoming they are. And the Cardinals athletic trainer who was in the dugout last year just got promoted to director of health, essentially, for the entire organization. So hopefully we can see that grow, because our minor leagues actually saw a couple injuries last year, notably Cooper Jerpy being a big-time injury. But that's something that we have to look at next year, something really small to follow, as the Cardinals may not be so competitive, so it might be worthwhile tracking that. On top of that, speaking of starting pitchers, I wanted to look into some of the competitions that are going to be happening coming into spring. Again, 22 days until starters and catchers report. So looking at the back end of our rotation, the Cardinals have a clear competition heading into spring. 3 guys seem to have the best claim at the 5th spot in the rotation for the St. Louis Cardinals, and that are Richard Fitts, Hunter Dobbins, and Kyle Leahy. So I wanted to lay out for you guys what those guys look like, so as spring is happening, we have an idea of who they are. Firstly, Richard Fitts, who we brought over in one of our mini trades with the Boston Red Sox, is a 26-year-old who has about league average stuff, and it did not look good last year. Initially, he's honestly most notably known for his incredible nickname. I'll let you understand what Richard could be shortened to, and his last name being Fitz. Pretty great name. However, last year was not so successful for him. He came up initially as a rookie and pitched pretty well out of the bullpen, but last year he had an ERA plus of 83 and an ERA of 5.0, and his expected ERA and FIP were not much better. He ended the season with right arm neuritis, so the righty has upper end stuff in terms of his fastball, a really good fastball that he could leverage, and maybe we could help him out in learning how to use that better. So there's hope Fitz does well. A guy with a good fastball who also doesn't walk a ton of dudes is a good option for our rotation, but success hasn't been there. So maybe that right arm neuritis was bugging him longer throughout the season than expected, and maybe we can help heal that up again with our great health in our training staff. But I don't know. Richard Fitz is not where I'm resting my laurels next year and hoping that we gain much from. The next 2 guys I want to mention have a much higher expectations for me, and I have much higher hopes. The next one being Hunter Dobbins, another guy we got again from the Red Sox. And his big issue last year was a ACL tear in July that knocked him out for the season. But before that, he was actually pitching quite well. He had a 4.13 ERA through 61 innings pitched, and his FIP, his fielding independent pitching, was actually better than that with a 3.87, and his ERA plus a perfect 100. Now, that's not a guy that you want leading your rotation, being your number 2, 3. But in terms of having a back-end guy for the Cardinals going forward, this might actually be it. Hunter Dobbins looks like a dude who could definitely be a solid number 5 for the Cardinals in a time when we want to be competitive. I mean, being league average as a pitcher is definitely what you would want out of your 5th starter. And heck, he's still young. Maybe there's room for him to gain more. And he kind of had an up and down season. He had a great April, had a really rough May, and then when he had come back later in the summer, his numbers got right back to where you'd want to see in July before suffering that devastating injury. So there's hope that Dobbins was even getting better as the year went on, as opposed to Fitz, who really just was bad the entire time. So I'm hoping Fitz will be more of a bullpen piece. Dobbins, though, I actually have hope and looks like he could be doing better as a solid starter. A 69th percentile fastball and a 74th percentile walk percentage. Guy throws hard, doesn't walk dudes. A nice fastball slider combo, you could do a lot worse. The guy I think deserves the most shout out, and I think is actually really interesting, is Kyle Leahy. He's going to be converted from a bullpen piece to a starter last year. So Cardinals fans, you probably already know the name, as he had an excellent season last year out of the bullpen. The 28-year-old had a 3.07 ERA and 88 innings pitched. And his ERA plus 134. So that's to say his stuff was actually even better than his earned run average would tell you. His best trait, potentially, on top of having good stuff, is that his stuff is amplified by his 96th percentile extension. What that means is your extension is how close your arm physically is when it's letting go of the baseball, how close it is to the plate. So basically, it takes a guy who has about a league average fastball, and that fastball now is perceived as much, much quicker because you have less time to react to it because he's releasing it so close to the plate. And in a game like baseball, you releasing something a couple inches even closer to the plate than another guy is actually a really big deal. He's a big 6'5" guy, and you can see easily just watching him on video how that looks coming out of his hand. Players have a hard time adjusting to it, which is why his breaking pitches were actually also excellent because it's less time to adjust to that, less time to know if it's a fastball or a breaking pitch. So his stuff doesn't have to actually even be that amazing because the players have less time to react to it and figure out what's happening, which is a small edge that he could definitely bring over and I think be excellent in the rotation because naturally his fastball velo is going to go down. Players are going to start getting to his off-speed pitches a little bit more. He's going to need to rely on those off-speed pitches more because he's not just going to be pitching one inning. He's not going to have his top-notch stuff every single inning. So I think that extension could actually be something that gives him an edge to rely on. And with an excellent year last year, I'm excited to see what Leahy could be in our rotation as a fifth starter or potentially better. We'll have to see what happens. This is the perfect year to try something out like this. Last thing I want to cover is we might have seen a soft deadline/ultimatum on Brendan Donovan's trade. I've talked a ton about Brendan Donovan potentially being traded this coming season prior to it starting, and that's kind of where Chaim Bloom has his eyes set. Donovan notably was not at the Cardinals winter warmup because we're actively trying to trade him. Guys like Jojo Romero and Lars Nootbaar also weren't there because of the same reasons. And additionally, Pedro Pajes, but that's just because he got married. Congratulations, Pedro, if you're seeing this. But Bloom came out and said that teams asked at the winter warmup, he got asked by the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, is spring training your deadline for Brendan Donovan? And he said, yeah, ideally. That is when we're trying to trade him by. And obviously, a lot of caveats. It was, yeah, ideally. That's not to say he won't trade him in spring training, but Bloom went on to talk about how, in a great article by Derek Gould, how he wants to be fair to Brendan Donovan because he doesn't want to just be a guy who's trying to torture Donovan this entire time. He wants to get him into spring wherever he's going to be starting the season. He said, notably, this is a business with people, a business of people where you have to be monitoring people, not just statistics on a spreadsheet. So he wants to be fair to Donovan while also maximizing Donovan's potential. So we might have, if spring training gets going and Donovan's on the Cardinals, we might have to wait until the deadline in July before we see him get moved. Something worth noting. I don't know if you guys think the same way. If the Cardinals really had Jurangelo Sinja, who's the seventh best prospect on the Mariners, and their third best prospect in Lazaro Montes sitting there for the Cardinals as an offer that we heard way back around the winter meetings, I'd pull the trigger on that. I don't know quite what we're waiting for at this point, or just keep the guy, make your decision, and start building the team accordingly. Tell me what you guys think in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. Thank you guys for tuning into the St. Louis Cardinals Daily Podcast. I'm going to keep covering more stuff like this for you guys, and you let me know your thoughts on Donovan, your thoughts on who should be at the back end of our rotation, as well as do you think we actually have a special edge in the health department. Thank you guys for tuning in.